The Big Girl Feelings podcast contains explicit content that may be triggering for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Sex, consensual non-monogamy, toxic masculinity, boundary setting, fat phobia. These are just a few on a very long list of topics considered taboo and stigmatized by our society. But not anymore. Through genuine, honest, and often uncomfortable conversations, we're running away from societal norms and sprinting toward living our authentic truth. This is the podcast where anything goes. I'm your host, Ashley, and we're here to talk about our big girl feelings. Welcome back to the Big Girl Feelings podcast, where we are redefining societal norms and shifting perspectives through uncomfortable conversations. Today is going to be a very interesting episode. I am going to actually step aside today and hand over the mics, if you will, the microphones, both microphones, to my dear friend Chris, who you may have heard interject his silliness into the podcast at some point or another.
And that's about all I've offered.
Chris and I have been friends for a really long time. Chris and his beautiful wife, Ashley, have been friends of ours for many, many years. Chris and Brent actually, you know what? I'm going to let them fill you in on that.
Yeah.
Brent, who you may know from my social media feeds, is one of my partners. We're married. He's my husband. Chris and Brent have also been friends for a really long time. This topic has always been very important to me. The overall theme of the episode, I would say, is toxic masculinity. And I just wanted to give the boys a chance to explain what that means to them and how it's affected their lives as two of the more open men in my life that are not really afraid to show their feelings when it comes to expressing their emotions and just showing affection to their partners and even to each other. I'm going to hand it over to them. I'll probably interject with some comments. We have some really great listener questions today directed specifically to the boys.
That's great.
So I'm just going to hand it on over to them and let them take the reins, and
Yeah, no, thanks, Ashley, and I think it's a great idea to get the boys on for a little boy takeover, and it's
the Big Boy Feelings podcast,
I love that.
if you will.
It's funny when you kind of mention the idea of a guy's episode and just a guy's perspective episode in general. I thought it was a great idea. And when I was kind of racking my brain this past week I'm like, okay, we're actually recording this now. What are we actually going to talk about? How do I speak and not sound like I know what I'm talking about here? The topic that came to mind, the only topic that I feel like you have guys talk about on a podcast about lady feelings, is toxic masculinity and the role that it plays. And I was excited to have this conversation with Brent in particular because our relationship and our friendship actually predates your guys' relationship. Brent and I played baseball as kids. I think it was the first time you and I met, and then a couple of levels of school. Never would I call us besties. Like, we were never like sleeping over at each other's houses on Friday and Saturday nights or anything.
True.
But always, I feel like close friends, always a part of seemingly the same friend group, even as that friend group has evolved over the years. And I feel like this is a great platform for you and I to be able to have hard conversations, which probably won't be a hard or difficult conversation to have because we've known each other for 20 years.
Yeah, that's a frightening concept.
I didn't need to drop the
itself.
number on us, but I did, so
Yeah.
that's my bad.
Yeah, I think this is going to be... Thanks, Ashley, for doing the intro, because that would have taken me an hour to record.
The funny thing is, I actually had memorized the blurb in case I had to intro it. So, welcome to the Big Boy Feelings podcast, where we are redefining societal norms and shifting perspectives through comfortable conversations. I had done enough research. I had to say it. No, I told you when I meant to tell you. For me, and I'm sorry if I've already cut you off, get used to that.
No.
We're just used to that from being friends with you in general.
That's true. I do kind of bully. Maybe that's a topic for another day. So I've taken the liberty of, as we've, again, done some research getting in here, I've found a definition of toxic masculinity that I feel is worth starting the show with. The definition reads, and I've actually gussied up this definition a bit because I felt like it was not inclusive enough. And this is a internet definition. We can poke holes in it as we go on. Toxic masculinity refers to the notion that some people's idea of, quote, manliness perpetuates violence, domination, misogyny, homophobia, and aggression. Toxic masculinity involves cultural pressures for men to behave in a certain way, and it's likely this affects all boys and men in some fashion. Do we feel that's a fair, maybe this is a question for the ladies in the room and for ourselves, do we feel that's a fair definition?
I think that's pretty accurate, yeah.
I think so. Definitely interested to hear from your guys' perspective how you might elaborate on that or change it to make it more inclusive, or just if there's anything there that you thought should be there or something that isn't that you think should be.
Well, I can let you know what I changed and kind of where the definition was just a little thinner when it kind of named off, refers to the notion some people's idea of manliness perpetuates, I think it just said violence and domination, but I think there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more to toxic masculinity than just a couple of things.
Especially in this society.
No, exactly. And furthermore, and I don't know if the conversation will go there, but I think we're good individuals, I think, Brent and I, to talk to toxic masculinity, because I think, Brent, as a man in a polyamorous relationship, I think your definition of masculinity might be different than mine, or, as I've said in previous podcasts, normal people. And also worth mentioning, for those who don't know me, I have over a decade's worth of work experience working in an industry in professional sports that is so dominated by a lot of those bullet points we just mentioned. There's a lot of toxic behavior, a lot of violence, certainly aggression, a lot of that peak masculine traits that I have seen, maybe a lot of the worst of what masculinity has to offer. So I think between the two of us, I'm really excited to further this conversation along. So let me start in, Brent, by maybe asking you, we'll keep it on point to your relationship as it stands now. I'm curious, as someone who's known you for so long, how other friends in your friend group, or maybe even some family members, what their reaction to you is when they learn you're in a polyamorous relationship, and what does that maybe do to skew your own idea of your own masculine identity? What's the reaction maybe that other people have had? And I partially ask this question because I've known your friend group for so long. I know your parents a little bit. I know like they're pretty standard and traditional folks. So I'm just curious as to maybe how open-minded they have been.
In terms of our friends, I think most people, or pretty much everybody, has been quite supportive and really happy for us. And there hasn't really been any, which was a little surprising, honestly, but there hasn't really been any negativity around it at all from anybody in this generation.
True. And I suppose if they're friends with you, they are people who, at least to a degree, will share your beliefs, or at least want to support you in finding yours. So I think that doesn't really surprise me.
Yeah. So from a friend perspective, it's been pretty good. We haven't really had any issues with anybody from sort of, our generation.
I will say that we have, I think, done a very good job of curating a friend group that, like, especially at our age, we just don't have time for the bullshit is the simple way.
I respect that.
Yeah.
Well, what about family then? Because really, and I'm not saying, tell me about your relationship with your parents, but I'm just talking more in general. Like, I can imagine even aunts and uncles, like, this is a tough, your parents who know you and love you and support you, I imagine might be a little easier than the uncle you see twice a year.
My parents, I think, they've been good. They've been really supportive. They will invite all three of us to everything that they do. There's never
kind of embrace the situation.
Yeah, they sort of expect the three of us to show up to things at this point. When we first told them, they weren't, there was no issue. I think they were a little confused. Mom was very mom's a worrier. So she was I think a lot of it was just around well, what does this mean? And how does this affect you? And what if something goes wrong? And From
an empathetic point of view.
Just worried mom stuff, I think.
And we had, Brent and I had been together 13 years at that point. So Brent's mom and I had
our own relationship,
Yeah, my parents have been really good. They were a little confused at first, and I think that generation, are that boomer generation, I guess.
That's why I asked.
Yeah, they're a little more traditional,
Very
and my parents are very that way. Like they're very much, they both, dad's had a government job since he was 18 and mom's been working in healthcare since she was about the same age.
That's everyone's boomer parents.
After a year of trade school kind of thing.
Yep.
And they bought their house for $9 and whatever.
Exactly.
Must be nice. But anyway, they are very traditional and very much that way. So they were a little confused, and I think it's not something that they'd ever really encountered before. So there was a bit of explaining and kind of like, this is what we're doing, and that's okay. And yeah, over a pretty short period of time, honestly, they came to just accept it and sort of have been really best kind ever since.
Okay. No, that's good. That's certainly the answer I was hoping you were going to provide to the situation.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe I should have asked this part of the question before the parents one, but I don't even know if you've reflected on this to this level, but have you noticed your own definition of masculinity has changed as you've opened your mind to obviously the current situation that you are in? Or maybe at what point did you kind of start thinking that I'm capable of loving more than one person. I am capable of beyond.
My own real sort of definition of masculinity, or the way that I behave, or the way that I behave towards women, or the way that I behave in general, really hasn't changed a whole lot, because I think it kind of was the way that I want it. I am the way that I want to be. I've always been a very open-minded person who. So
that is true.
Yeah. So
over the years that has been true.
Yeah. So I really never was in a place where you
didn't have to travel far.
No, exactly. There wasn't a long way to go to get to where I am right now. I've always been the type of person who, the way that I show love is by just taking care of people,
That's true.
Do you need a glass of water? Let me cook you
I've noticed
something.
that about you very much so. And that's not, I see Ashley laughing, and honestly, my Ashley, no, there's two Ashleys in here. The other one was, that's funny.
I'm just thinking
There's
about
too
the
many in here.
experiment we performed a couple of weeks ago.
Okay. Are we talking about this?
Please, can we
Okay.
Why not?
No, so one of the things I admire truly about Brent, and I think this works into the conversation, or I hope it's not just a funny story, is your,
it's okay if it is.
Your willingness in your relationship, or your willingness to do what is asked of you at the drop of a hat. I don't have that same willingness necessarily. I'm working on it because of what I see you are capable of doing. However, so this was, I think, when we were recording our last episode.
I think so.
You went to the kitchen, I think, to get something for one of the ladies. And I kind of looked over to Ashley and be like, can we have some fun with Brent and see how many times in a row we can send him back to the kitchen for different things, make him make different trips? And Ashley, being the S disturber that I know her to be, she was like, oh, most definitely. And God love him. How many did we get up to, Ash? 8 or 9 trips back. But you didn't bat an eyelash.
That, like I said, that's just the way that I sort of am.
It's
and
your
I've always,
love language.
It is my love language. I take care of people, and it's more my partners, but it's everybody. If I have guests in my house, I'm very much the
That's
host.
true.
I'm very much the entertainer. And do you need anything? Do you want a glass of water? Do you want a drink?
You'll leave in the middle of a thing to be like, oh, we all want ice cream? Cool. I am in the car and I am on the way.
Gone for ice cream because
well,
everybody wants ice cream.
We want ice cream.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I poke fun clearly, but it is commendable.
And over time, I think we've gotten flack from family members. My family especially gives me shit all the time. And it's become like a trope, right? All of our friends admire Brent for that. So now it's like when all of the girls are hanging out, it's like that's his thing. He does that stuff for all of the girls.
But to keep it on our conversation, it's the manliest behavior you could exhibit, is it not? By that definition? Having all the ladies fawning over how awesome you are and just being the premium gentleman? Am I hitting it on the head here? Ashley says yes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
I don't expect you to think that of yourself.
No,
you're right.
I guess,
I am the definition.
Like I said, it's how I show my affection and my love for people. I don't know
more man than me, I guess, in that sense.
That speaks again back to toxic masculinity. And then there are people on the other side of the spectrum who would expect the woman in the relationship to be always
I am not on that place on the spectrum.
We wouldn't even be here. I wouldn't be talking to you if you were, because those are not the type of people I want to ever associate myself with.
And I think also those caretaking roles are usually performed by women less so than men. The expectation for a woman to jump up and fix a man a plate at an event, that's not going to be questioned by anybody. To have the gender roles reversed in that is shocking shocking to people.
That's exactly right. I think that the reason it ties in so well to toxic masculinity is because people find it so shocking. We all want everybody to be equal, right? Like that's the ultimate goal. But however people want to live their lives, just let them do it. Why is it gay or whatever slur you want to use towards Brent or any man like him just because he takes on a bit of
why
a
is
different...
it so admirable that, right? It's just like a caretaking role.
I think it's just, it's just something that, we need to get to a place, I think, in society in general, and this comes back to the changing societal norms bit of the intro, that,
Great point.
If you were in the 50s or whatever, and it was always very much like the man went to work and the woman took care of the house. But one, I don't agree with that anyway, but the world is not like that anymore.
True.
Almost every household is at 2 incomes or more.
Correct.
In our case.
Or 3.
Great point.
But everybody works,
Yeah.
right? Most women work. And most men work. Not to say that, all men work and most women, some don't. Most people work.
I just have a really quick good point about what you guys are talking about specifically.
Please.
There have been so many times where we've been having dinner at my sister's. Like Brent will take up my food. Not always, but sometimes he does, or Rebecca's or whatever. And my mom will say, "Oh, get up and get it yourself," like half jokingly, but there's a little judgment there.
That's something that the boomer generation's real good at.
The hypocrisy is real because she says that to me while she's in the middle of taking
fixing-
up my stepdad's supper.
Exactly. So then
Interesting.
when it's the other way, when it's her taking up a plate for him, it's fine. But when it's him taking up a plate for her, it's not.
It's wrong.
It's somehow.
Something feels different about it.
Right? That, I think, strikes at the heart of this.
Well, it's a gender role thing, right?
Toxicity.
Or the perceived tradition of gender role.
Exactly. It strikes at the heart of this traditional gender roles thing that you can literally do if you are a man and you behave a certain way, it's a problem somehow. But if a woman does the exact same thing, it's expected,
Right.
which is very strange to me. And I just feel like most people have equal responsibilities
Right.
in a household. I mean, for example, for the most part, Ashley is the one who handles the money in our relationship.
Right.
That would be unheard of in the 50s, right? You're not coming home and giving all the money to a woman.
Women couldn't have a credit card until I think at least the 60s.
This is what I'm saying. They couldn't even handle
Yeah,
money.
the landscape has changed
they
an awful
legally
lot.
didn't even get the same access to funds.
Meanwhile, when I met Brent, he didn't have online banking. The IT guy didn't have online banking.
I didn't. No, that's true.
When he moved into my apartment, he brought his TV
The
and
essentials.
all of his clothes still on hangers. That's what he moved into my apartment.
All of my belongings I put into a Subaru Impreza and made one trip.
Did you move in directly from your parents' house?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I moved out of a room in my parents' house and took the stuff in that room that I owned, basically. A laptop, TV that I had purchased, and my clothes, again, still on it. Didn't pack it or anything. Took the hangers out of the closet.
What more do you need?
Yeah.
There's a really funny Friends episode. Of course, I have a Friends reference for everything.
You would know it.
Yeah, where Joey gets a female roommate and she decorates the entire apartment with fluffy pillows and artwork. I think it's Anne Geddes artwork, and he falls in love with it all, and he's making pot holders with Monica, and just he wants to bring the pillows and stuff into his bedroom, but the guys just rip him apart for it. And I think that's a
Interesting.
classic pop culture. And of course, I love Friends, but a lot of the jokes from the early 90s don't hold up, right? But that's just a classic example of toxic masculinity in pop culture.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a great example.
Yeah, and I think there's nothing, if you don't like those things, that's fine. But I think everybody should be free to like whatever it is that they do like. And if what they like is, pretty decorations, fine.
Go mad.
Yeah, I think that's great. It comes back to we're all people, and I don't think that the, traditional gender roles that used to exist, whether they made sense at the time, I don't think they did, but they certainly don't today.
Before we get too far away, I kind of want to touch on something else in regards to kind of your relationship and what it means to be the man in it. Have you received any judgment from anyone who might bring into question your sexuality, given your place in a polyamorous relationship? Does that confuse anyone? Does anyone think, oh, you must be gay because you're, which is a strange thing, being in a relationship with two women, which is not gay at all. It's anti-gay.
It doesn't seem very gay to me.
No, but I just wonder, have people called your own sexuality into question?
You know what? Yes, but it far predates the beginning of this polyamorous relationship. People have been asking me if I, like, not in a derogatory way even, people have just been genuinely asking me about my sexuality since I was a teenager.
Why do you think that is?
I really don't know. I think maybe it's potentially just an energy or some sort of
It's a quiet,
vibe.
confident. Yeah, I think you're right. It's just
and
I think when people see confidence and comfort in one's own skin, I think people are like, hey, you can't be normal. Like, they get defensive as to why they're not that, you know?
That's a really good point. They get defensive because it makes them uncomfortable.
Right.
Because it challenges what they know. And, like, now I might be biased.
You are biased.
Of course I'm biased. But I'm also a very good judge of character. And I think that Brent transcends what it means to be a man. And that's not like a dig at all the other men that exist, because of course there are lots there are lots of great men out there, but Brent really does, he's like the epitome of, he's so genuine, and I think that's what it is. Like, bottom line is that he's very genuine and he just lets himself be who he is without fear of repercussions from society. And I think that overall, if more people could get to that place, and I think especially men, because they deal with toxic masculinity from their families and their friends and society in general and social media. I mean, we have our own slew of problems as women, but I just think for men, the fact that they have to face that, we've made it a very difficult world for men to be authentic. And I think Brent has just managed somehow to transcend that.
I think the way that I've sort of tried to at least transcend those sort of things is I just do what I want. If I want to do something, a few weeks ago, I went with the girls to a heels dance class, and I put on...
Like, where you participate?
Oh, yeah. I put on 3-inch or 4-inch heels. And
we can post the video of that later, actually.
Certainly. And
love that.
And did a dance class with them. And it, you know what?
What size shoes did you have to find?
I wore Ashley's, actually.
Sweet.
Yeah, they were a little small.
I have pontoon feet.
She does. They're a little bit smaller than mine.
Peggy Hill style, is that it?
They were like a little bit too small maybe, but they fit fine, and they worked.
Gives you the full effect.
Oh, absolutely. So
there's a walk a mile in some shoes joke in there somewhere.
There absolutely is. Yeah, I just sort of do, like, if I think something will be fun, or I want to do it, or I think I would enjoy it, I just do it. You know, I don't
dive into the minutia of the details of what's this going to look like, who's going to care I'm doing, because you don't care.
Because I don't give a shit. I don't care who thinks what.
You're comfortable enough in yourself to just do the thing.
Right, whatever. And if people want to be like, oh, are you gay? I'll be like, well, no.
No.
Actually.
Here's girl 1, and here's woman 1, and here's woman 2.
Right, exactly. Like,
where's the gay?
Brent, how do you know you're not gay?
Oh, because I tried it. Twice.
I know the story you're referring to, but I wasn't going to bring that up.
I've tried stuff a couple times, but again, I don't see the need for a label. You know what I mean?
Agree.
I just tried something with someone that I, felt a connection with or whatever, and that's fine. And I think that's okay.
I always say my approach to life is I'll try anything twice, because you never really know what the first time you eat something, listen to new music, watch a movie, you really don't know how you're going to. Yeah. It's an unfair representation of your perception of that thing.
And sexuality is even doubly so, because you already have all these predisposed blocks, like mental blocks.
So it's really refreshing to see someone to be like, I don't know if this is me, but I'm going to try it and see. Yeah. And the fact that you were able to kind of come to your own conclusion based on that, again, says more about your masculinity and your manliness than anything ever could, in my mind.
Well, this is the thing. I think that toxic masculinity and this sort of idea of like what it means to be a man, and that there's some sort of strict definition of manliness and masculinity and all of these kinds of things really stems at its root from insecurity. Yeah. Men are afraid that someone's going to think they're gay, so they have to be as not gay as possible so that everybody's absolutely sure that they're not gay, because what if somebody thinks I'm gay? The mistake that those people are making is that they're caring what anybody else thinks about their sexuality.
We actually got a listener question that kind of fits in really well here, so I'm just going to read it
Love
out
it.
and would love to get your answer on this, Brent. It was directed at you specifically. So the question is, I know you've said before you have a fourth person in your polycule. Have you had sex with that person or fantasized about it, even though you have two female partners?
Well, we've never had sex. I'm pretty slutty, so like I'm not gonna say I've never fantasized about it. I feel like it's pretty normal to have fantasies about your friends and anybody that you find attractive. I think that's a pretty normal thing to do. We've never actually had sex. No, we've never actually had any, sexual contact. She is also asexual, so that does
plays a factor.
That's a wrench for sure. But the short answer is no. We've never had any sexual contact, but I'm definitely not going to say that. I've never
fantasized?
I've never thought about it because
we've joked about it and talked about it, and you go around naked in front of her all the time. Like, it's not like it's a...
And that's cool?
Yeah, like...
If we're friends with you guys, I think it comes with a
caveat.
Yeah.
There might be there's a nudity, reminder as you walk through the door.
Yeah, slightly off topic, but we're going to a cabin with some friends of ours this weekend, and it's been kind of a joke, like, this is a new partner for my friend, and she's warned him a couple times, like, he's walked in the house a couple times, and I've just been, like, in the bathroom naked and been like, don't come upstairs. But this weekend, there's a hot tub, and they came over last night, and I was like, now, we're just going to have to come to terms with the fact that you're probably going to see my titties this weekend.
You'll keep it business casual.
Yeah, for sure.
Business casual titties. Absolutely. Yeah.
That'll be a merch item one day.
Definitely. Business casual titties.
Could see the shirt.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue with, around masculinity and toxic masculinity and all those things is just insecurity and people being afraid of either who they are or who someone else might think they are. And that is the biggest issue, I think. The biggest issue is just people caring what other people think so much that they're willing to change
isn't that
who they are, how they behave.
An adage that, men are most afraid of women laughing at them, where women are more afraid of being attacked. I'm skimming, I know, but like my Ashley is nodding vehemently at me.
Yeah, I think it's a Margaret Atwood quote. It's that men are afraid that women will laugh at them. Women are afraid that men will kill them. But I think another addition to that thought is that men are also afraid that men will kill them. That's the homophobia. That's the everything else.
That is very true.
Chris, on that note, I'm interested to hear, like, from your perspective, having worked in the sports industry for so long, what that looks like from your perspective. I haven't worked in the hockey industry, but I am involved in it in the sports industry. I have spent a lot of time around athletes. I've played a lot of sports, but I don't have that same perspective that you might have. So I'm just interested from your perspective.
Like toxic masculinity in sports and how I've witnessed it maybe firsthand. Is that?
Yeah, and I think it's a little deeper in sports. I think that the men who have those traits in the sports industry would probably have them anyway. But I'm just curious, like, the people that you've encountered and how that looks in that industry to you.
The quote-unquote alpha male, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that an industry like professional sports, where you have people competing as the core of the business, I do think that business will attract your traditionally masculine types. And that includes, one of the things in the definition, aggression, I think, is lauded in hockey, which is the industry I have predominantly worked in. Trying to separate what you see on the ice from the humans underneath the helmets. To their credit, I think I see more players in the modern day who are very aware of their role in the community, their role as a male, and I think that they lean more onto the teamwork side of things. It's hard to, because they're individuals, right? It's hard to really pinpoint to make any broad cases. Have I seen really awesome down-to-earth dudes who will knock your head off in the 60 minutes on the ice, and off the ice they are the opposite of what you might think that person to be? But on the other side of things, do I know individuals who epitomize the former era, maybe, of guys, who are misogynists. They are aggressive to the point of that carries over into their personality, and it carries into their home life and the way that they treat other individuals. So like, you do see it on both sides. I chose to associate with ones the same way that you guys in your friend group don't surprise your friends because they're like-minded people. I think I also associated with some of the more like-minded folks in the industry. Now, that being said, I'll share a story that I think is really interesting because over the last couple of years, we've really seen both sides of the coin, quite frankly, in the sports and hockey in particular. You've seen a lot of scandal. I'm speaking specifically to the 2018, I think, the World Junior Team Canada hockey team. Sexual assault scandal still ongoing. Lives have been ruined. Careers have been ruined. Collective hockey culture has been put under the microscope, which is a good thing. And we've seen the first openly gay professional hockey player take to the ice as that in the last year or two. That gentleman played in the same league even that I worked in, which was really cool to see. So I remember during one road trip, must have been a long bus ride because I had a really good conversation with a young player. And I asked him, I said, hey man, I know there's only one openly gay player, but I said, do you think there's more? How do you feel like they would be accepted in the community? And I think, first of all, the question took him completely off guard, which I think speaks volumes to the lens I think a lot of these people look through. However, and he was like, in today's day and age, I really don't know that that's such a big deal. I was like, did you think about what it would be like getting in the shower? Because they're gym-style showers. That's the name of the game in pro sports. And he was like, yeah, I don't really know. But I think it made him, his takeaway was a little more critical thought, I think, for him. And it just goes to show that I do think the industry as a whole, and I'm kind of really speaking in broad terms, I think the days are gone where the guys are assholes and misogynists, and hazing was a big part somehow of pro sports. I think we're moving away from that. Hockey still has a culture problem, and I think it really came to the point with this sexual assault situation we're in with the World Junior team. But I don't think it's as bad. Your modern day players are probably not as bad as the former generation, but as a whole, pro sports, you're always going to have some disparities, I think, between traditional masculinity and rah-rah, beat your face in, and that just being a profession and a role you play for 60 minutes. I think there's some more work to be done in internalizing being a normal, decent human being. And you can be a ruthless hockey player and still be a normal human being. And then there's also the CTE side of things in pro sports, which is still a factor that I don't even know what the words stand for necessarily. It's concussion testing and the impacts. You see it a lot in the NFL in particular with head traumas and that kind of things. There's so many factors at play, but hockey, which is what I can speak to in particular, I've seen the evidence that we are coming out the other side of the culture issue that hockey has gone through over the last generation. Boy, that's a long answer to your question, and I hope I did okay with it.
Definitely. I think that's a really good answer, and I'm really relieved to hear that. I spend a lot of time on sports media and stuff like that, and like a lot of the commentary, especially from young guys coming up through and stuff, is still particularly concerning to me. However, anyone can hide behind a keyboard, first of all. But secondly, I do agree. I think that we're also seeing more women in sports media.
Great point.
More feminine
and in pro
voices.
sports in general, when you see the success of the Professional Women's Hockey League.
Yeah, more people are watching and participating in and also just paying attention to women's sports. And I think that the younger generation are
That's
a
an
little
interesting topic that kind of falls under the toxic masculinity too, is the public perception of women's pro sports.
Yeah.
And how that's changed, because you've heard so many skeptics about the pro women's hockey league saying this will never work, whatever. And look at the crowds, look at the numbers. Men, women, and children alike are going out to support just good pro sports. It doesn't matter the gender. That to me has been arguably the most refreshing thing to see in pro hockey culture in my lifetime, maybe. It's incredible to see.
I agree. I wish that I wasn't seeing so much of the negative commentary. What's particularly concerning is that a lot of these comments are coming from other women. Let's get something straight here. Toxic masculinity is not just caused by men. I'm going to throw that out there right now. Women perpetuate it almost as much, if not as much, as men do. The women who are commenting on these articles about women's hockey and are saying things like, nobody wants to watch women's hockey. Women's hockey is boring. At least the men's hockey has some blah, blah, blah. It's the same women who perpetuate the gender norm.
It's internalized misogyny.
Yes, 100%.
That's
and
what
so
it is.
it's internalized misogyny, exactly. And they're perpetuating toxic masculinity by having those thoughts and saying them out loud.
Yes, they're serving like the patriarchy with those
Exactly.
comments,
It hurts.
even
It
though
hurts our
it hurts
cause.
them.
Yeah.
I think overall, yeah, women do also perpetuate those ideas of masculinity and like I want this or that or the other thing in a man and I want my man to be a man and like these types of things as well. And when they say that, they have a specific definition of what a man is in their own head, and they
Right.
want someone who is that. That's fine, I guess, if that's what they're looking for. But I think that the message that a lot of men will take away from that is if I am not that, then I'm not going to get women, or I'm not going to find someone, and therefore men will try to shift their behavior away from who they truly are to be more like this stereotype that they think women want.
The hyper masculine.
And that even ties into the type of women that they pursue.
I absolutely. I think that there is a certain type of woman who is looking for that certain type of man.
Toxic masculinity, I think, causes men to think that they need to pursue like a particular type of woman that looks a certain way. It's like expected by society, and by not having the hottest or prettiest partner or girl, that somehow like reduces their manliness. Like I've definitely encountered that, and I think it's such a weird concept.
I think
But
that
you know my point.
I do. I think there's an expectation, I guess. Women are looking for a particular type of man, and then that men are looking for a particular type of woman, but that's all being defined by society and societal norms, and it's always, those definitions are always very superficial. Like you could draw the definition of those things.
Right.
It takes into account nothing of someone's personality or their quote-unquote soul or who they are as a person or how good a person they are or bad a person they are. It really only takes into account how they look and maybe the beliefs that they espouse in some ways.
I'm just curious, not to always bring it back to sex or the sex club, but how does maybe the average polyamorous male or the average sex club male, what is their masculine identity from what you have witnessed? How is that maybe different than the traditional idea of masculinity? Like, what is the identity of one versus the other, do you think?
To call back to a previous episode a little bit, I think it has a lot to do with jealousy. People who are in polyamorous relationships, people who are willing to go to a sex club and be with their partner or partners, and you're all naked, and maybe you're sharing and meeting new people and maybe having sex with them, and who knows. I think those people, like, you have to get past those jealous, possessive feelings that a lot of men, especially toxic men, exhibit towards women.
I wonder
like as
if
if they're an object to be possessed.
Great point. And I wonder if an institution like that inadvertently weeds out a fair bit of the toxic masculine traits.
I think so. I think it comes back to what you said in a previous episode about polyamorous relationships. People who are in polyamorous relationships tend to have more open mind, tend to be, like the men, I think, tend to be a little more in touch with their feminine side.
Right.
Like in Brent's case, those types of people frequent places like Oasis. So I think that comes back to
Because that's what I mean. My question came from, I would have a hard time picturing, for lack of a better word, like a dude bro in that environment.
Some people may surprise you.
That's what I was just going to say. So there was always exceptions to the
Yes,
rule, right?
yes.
I told a story in a previous episode about the big burly dude who was just wailing on the little Asian chick. He was like a total
And I'm not-
dude bro, but not in like the traditional dude bro way.
No, but that's I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, I can't picture a traditional dude bro without defining it. I can't picture that person lasting in a place like that.
No. And I think, again, it comes down to maybe if they were there by themselves and they were just, looking at women and stuff, then that, I guess that sort of tracks. But
Right.
to go there with a partner and have that partner be naked and other people are looking at
takes
her or him or whatever. Although
a
with
pretty
dude bros, it's
comfortable,
usually her.
grounded cat to do that.
Exactly, and I think that these sort of dude bro types are the exact opposite of that, where they tend to be very jealous and possessive of. Again, they feel like that's my woman, like
Right.
that the type of guy who would say, that's my girl, that's my woman. They're not going to do very well in that environment.
No, that's true.
because-
And yeah, come to think of it, any of these elements, like if you're too aggressive, which is another, masculine trait, that's not going to fly in that institution. If you're misogynistic, hell no. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, I guess it doesn't surprise me that there's you will likely not find. Well, I guess that could be a question. Have you found any toxic masculinity in these venues?
Honestly, not really. It's been every time we've been there has been a very positive experience, and everybody is very welcoming and very, anybody that you see, anybody that you talk to, they all tend to be very open and accepting and kind and friendly, and just, you can walk up to anyone and really start a conversation, and as long as there's no issue with them having a conversation like they didn't want to be talked to or something, then there's really no issue. Everybody's very good.
I think a lot of men honestly would just have trouble being those types of men. Being in that environment with just friggin' dicky birds hanging out everywhere would just
Good
make
point.
them so uncomfortable. I think that's hilarious, but
I agree. That's why I say it with a smirk on my face.
but that's the type of guys that are just never going to show up at a place like that, or they're not going to last there.
I
very
just,
long,
in
right?
my mind, I'm like, maybe they're swayed in by the thought of pussy. Do you know what I mean?
But then the
Sorry
first
to use
first
that
time
word,
they
but
see,
That's I'm borrowing their language.
But the first time they see a naked man, that immediately is going to make them uncomfortable. And the other thing that, to tie back to, these guys tend to be insecure, they're going to be constantly comparing themselves to every
point.
other man there. If you walk into a place and you're constantly comparing yourself to everybody else there and wondering if you're better than them or worse
You
than them,
probably won't come back.
you're not going to have a very good time,
No.
are you? And you're not going to be there for
A
very
repeat
long.
customer you will not be.
No.
Probably won't come back, huh?
Yes.
There
And
we
we
go.
thought we weren't going to get any puns in this show.
Yeah, we had to have at least one. It's not the Big Girl Feelings podcast if we don't have at least one.
So I got a really cool message actually on the anonymous form on the website. I want to read it to you guys and get your. It's more so looking for advice
I love that.
than a question. So as a male listener to the podcast, first let me say thank you. I guess I'm oblivious to a lot of the quote unquote culture norms. Your perspective on the world, relationships, and so on challenges how I think, and I must say I really enjoy it. Keep the content coming. Whoever you are, thank you for saying that, because that's exactly what we're striving for here, is to get people thinking outside of societal norms and cultural norms, and especially males. So we really, really appreciate that feedback and hope you continue to listen and provide us with any feedback that you have on any
Please.
topic. Yeah. So question for the boys. I struggle with communicating with my partner. I find we have fallen into a phase of just existing versus living and loving. Don't get me wrong, we have a lot of good in our lives, kids, careers, family, etc., but I just feel like I want or need more. How can I improve my communication skills to ensure my partner and I have more of an open dialogue when we are feeling this way? And how can I help my partner to do the same? Thanks. Signed, one straight white male.
Can I speak to that for a minute?
Absolutely.
So, as far as communication goes, when Ashley and I first got together, I was not a good communicator. I tended to be very defensive if I felt I was being called out, and I was very afraid of confrontation, and so often I would say nothing if something bothered me just because I didn't want to have an argument about it. But the key, I think, with communication is you have to practice it. You have to do it. You have to start talking. You have to open a dialogue and start talking about things, even if they're uncomfortable, just like we do here on the podcast. You have to have conversations, even if they are uncomfortable ones.
And I know that sounds like, well, not that easy, but the fact is, everything comes down to communication. You just have to rip off the Band-Aid and start talking.
Yeah, you just have to be direct. You just say, I'd like to have a conversation with you, or something like that, and then say your piece.
And every journey starts with a single step, right? You have to start communicating, and the moment that you start to talk about things. And I will also say communication isn't just about airing grievances. You have to talk about everything. You have to talk about things that made you happy. Start just talking about your day. You know, if you
just
go to
start
work,
talking. Whatever
Yes.
gets you talking to one another.
Exactly.
Go there.
Yeah. Go to, if you come home from work, tell your partner about your day. And don't leave out anything. Don't say it was fine. Talk about
Let
your
them in.
day. Let them in. When your partner feels like they're being heard and like they're part of the conversation, they'll open up to. They will start to communicate back because it's so easy to talk to someone who's so easy to talk to and is constantly talking.
A lot of times, you're both thinking the same thing. Like in this particular case, your wife, your partner is probably thinking the same thing. And it's just neither of you has been able to work up the courage to start that conversation. Likely, if you're feeling this way, she probably is too. There may be a little bit of defensiveness or something at the beginning, but that's just kind of stuff that you have to work through to get down to the nitty gritty of it. But I bet if you start that dialogue with her, you're likely to see that she has some of those same concerns. And once you start that dialogue, it's like a waterfall. You will be amazed at how much progress you'll make in a short time just by starting to talk to each other.
And I think for me, a lot of it comes down to self-awareness too. Like, especially if you're coming home from a bad day at work, and I think it might be unfair to expect your partner to be the one to have to pull you out of that. I think you need to be aware of the person you are when you're looking to have these conversations and what you're bringing almost vibe-wise. Because I find for me, that's so important. If you come home from work in this hypothetical situation with a smile on your face, asking how was your day, showing, a genuine side, some genuine care to the other person, I think that goes a long way. The nonverbal side, just what your body language, what that does for communication, I think can go a long way as well.
100%. And what you just spoke to there, Chris, about self-awareness to this listener, the fact that you are self-aware and took the time to
great point.
ask this question, and you have realized that you're feeling these feelings and not just suppressing them, because that ties into toxic masculinity too. A lot of men, a lot of people have these feelings, but they're too afraid to talk to anyone about them, let alone their partner. You're already way ahead of the game.
Yeah, I agree. And I think life can get very busy, especially when you have kids, and you can fall into these patterns and these routines, as you said, and you just sort of are drifting from day to day. You really need to, even if you have to just schedule a little time to spend with your partner, just the two of you, and
you have to prioritize it.
You do. You have to prioritize your relationship, because if you don't, it suffers. It really does.
You have to date your wife. That doesn't stop when
That's
when one gets married. And it's easy to let that fall by the wayside as kids have soccer and life does happen, but don't lose sight of the person you're in all of this with, and find it within yourself to make this other person feel good, make yourself feel good.
Don't lose sight of who you are and what you want. Like, I know that kids tend to take priority. I don't have kids, so I can't relate. However, I will say that keeping sight of who you are and what you want is so important, and it's so easy to lose our identity and lose our individuality. Like Chris just said, remember who you're in this with.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say, actually, is this is your partner. This is the person that you've chosen for
This should be the easiest person in the world to have this conversation
Exactly.
with,
And
technically.
If it isn't, that's a bigger issue.
Yeah, if you think about the word partner in a larger sense, this is your partner in life. You and your partner are facing the world as a united front. And when you're not talking to each other, often that gets lost. And one other thing I will say to your point earlier about, if you come home from work and you had a bad day, one of the best things that you can do in that instance is tell your partner, look,
I had a bad day.
I had a bad day at work. That, first of all, opens a dialogue. And second of all, will alert your partner that I may not be in the best mood today. Right? Because if you're just wandering around the house, right? If you're wandering around the house seeming off and your partner doesn't know why,
well, they're not going to want to talk to you for the rest of the night.
No,
like, communication's no longer an option today.
No, and the other thing is, a lot of times people will think, is it me? Did I do something? Right? You see that meme of like the two people lying in bed, and the woman's like, I bet he's thinking about other women, and he's like, I can't figure out why my boat won't start.
Exactly.
And that's what's bothering him, really. She doesn't know that because he never told her. I guess that's an interesting comment on what's supposed to be a funny meme, but it's a real thing. If you just start talking, start communicating, start talking about your day, start talking about anything to start communicating and talk to your partner again.
It's not easy to just go in and be like, hey, can we talk about our sex life? Can we talk about how well we're communicating or not? Like, that's not an easy conversation to just come in blind on.
Right.
Even if that's, I guess, the goal of what you want to talk about with your partner. And I think, to your point, it starts with, how was your day?
You get to that other stuff.
How's that new album? How's the new Taylor Swift album? I know you've been listening to it. Like, show some interest in what you're doing or what your partner is doing and start the communication, and you'll then be able to soon communicate about what you want to communicate about.
If you're already at that point, don't be afraid to have a conversation about having a conversation. Brent and I, throughout our entire relationship, we've been together over 13 years, and now the three of us, same thing. Our relationship talk time is usually bedtime. So when we get in bed at night, that's kind of like an intimate time. It's a quiet time. It's a time when you know your kids are already asleep. You know your partner better than anyone. Explain it to her gently that you'd like to start opening up more dialogue, you'd like to communicate better, and ask her how she feels about that. Always ask how your partner feels, or partners, or friends or family, whoever you're having a discussion with. When you're bringing up these sensitive topics, vulnerable topics, remember to keep checking in. Be very gentle. Just bring it up that you'd like to talk a little more, that you'd like to have more time with them to discuss these more vulnerable topics. Ask them to go on a date, like the boys just said, like Chris just said. And that's private time where you guys can sit down, have a nice dinner, whatever it is you like to do together, and just bring it up.
And turn off everything else you're doing. Focus on each other. Put yourself in a position where you will be successful in doing that. Because if you're pushing aside piles of laundry and kids' toys to try and carve out you time, maybe you can do a bit better. Go to Applebee's. It doesn't have to be an expensive or romantic, a traditionally romantic affair either.
Go for a coffee, man. Sit down over a coffee, sip on a coffee, and talk.
Talk about the things you hate together. Or whatever gets you talk, whatever common ground that you have, find it and create.
Build from that. There's a reason why things like couples counseling are so effective. The reason is because it forces you into a room with your partner with a trained professional who knows how to get people to talk to each other.
I agree. It does work for a lot of people, but it's so institutional. Ashley just said it's so institutional, and I agree.
Couples counseling is maybe the nuclear option. You know what I mean?
Right. But not to say it's a bad option.
But it's at that point, I think it's where your relationship has gone.
You probably need that.
So far to a point where now you don't even know who your partner is or how to talk to them, and now you need someone to help facilitate
the real
that.
hack for connecting with your partner. Listen to this show with them. I say that partially in jest. However, I'll say firsthand, without oversharing, for Ashley and I, being a part of this podcast has led to further meaningful conversations and communications on our part. And I feel like our bond is stronger as a result in our own unique way. Let's say you want to have more sex with your partner. Maybe you can listen to the sex episode and, hey, what do you feel about this? How does this part make you feel? I'm not just trying to promote our podcast. Trust me. Maybe it could work in having someone else bring up the topic that maybe you're having difficulty approaching with your partner.
That is such a good point. I actually encourage that as well. I think that that's a really good idea because, like you said, things that you want to bring up, you're still not quite there to bring them up yourself, but it's easier to say, oh, that's an interesting point, right? What do you think of that?
We specialize in the uncomfortable conversations here, so
we have them so you don't have to.
That's right. That's the tagline. And we're back.
A point I wanted to make as well for our letter writer here is that you need at least two people who are willing to communicate. So hopefully that's what you have in your partner, is someone who wants to connect with you and communicate with you. But that's just something to keep in mind. Like, they also have to be a willing participant in the conversation. And I can say that, like Brent said, I hate communicating. It's too close to feelings, which I also hate. So it's It's funny I'm on this podcast.
And I know the confrontation bit for you, just as your partner, I know is something that I shy away from with you because I know that that is not going to be an effective way to communicate with you.
That's what it is for most people, honestly, is the confrontation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Knowing your partner, I think, is a really important, and knowing what their communication style is and what they are comfortable with and not what they're not comfortable with gives you a huge advantage in being able to open a dialogue.
Yeah, definitely. And what works, I think, for us is like, hey, babe, nothing is wrong, but I'd like to talk to you with a serious conversation later. Maybe saying about this thing, or just saying, I'd like to talk to you later. Nothing's wrong, but like, let's reconvene kind of thing.
And I think that's why like bedtime works for us. You can't do that when there are like things in the air that are causing people stress. If there's stress going on in your family, you need to know your audience and know your environment as well. You can't just, you don't want to throw that out there.
And it will take maybe a bit of courage. There's a reason that we stress on this podcast, the importance of having uncomfortable conversations. And I think that can be taken into everyone's unique relationship as well. Sometimes things are hard to talk about, but it's still worth talking about. You don't have to shy away from conversations like this. Yep. So again, just find a way, I think, to begin communicating, period.
Yes.
And it will only improve from that moment forward.
Definitely. And uncomfortable conversations will still be uncomfortable. Don't think that, if you're not totally comfortable talking about this, then you shouldn't, because you never will be totally comfortable talking about those things.
But they do get easier.
It does get easier, but don't wait until you're totally comfortable, because you'll never have that conversation. Dive in. Once you're at a level of comfort where you think you're going to be okay, dive into that conversation and have it, because waiting around forever, you're not ever going to get there.
The conversation's worth having with your partner.
If the conversation is worth having, it's worth being a little uncomfortable for.
Absolutely, yeah. And another thing I wanted to say is that I find we have some of our best conversations in the car, because you can escape. I love to leave. That's a bad trait about me, but I love to just stop it and leave. So the car is a good place for that.
Great point.
Yeah.
I just want to say too, like, I'm no professional by any means, but we do have very good communication in our relationship. And if you ever want to reach out to me privately just to have an unbiased ear, you can reach out to me anytime privately, and it can still be anonymous. I just wanted to throw that out there, and that goes for this particular listener, and it also goes for anybody else. I am an open book, and I am always happy to be an unbiased ear for anybody who feels like they're getting value out of anything that I'm saying. So keep that in mind going forward. And actually, I think a good, like a natural trajectory from here would maybe to do an episode on communication next.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I think that would be an invaluable episode. I think a lot of people would get a lot from it. And again, yeah, we're not professionals, but we do communicate very well.
But you guys don't get to be in a throuple and in a polyamorous relationship without working on your communication.
When you are in a polyamorous relationship,
it's a prerequisite.
I say to people all the time, like, only certain people can really do that, and it's all about your communication and your communication skills. If you can talk to your partner to the point where you're comfortable enough that you know that bringing in a third person is not going to break anything, then you're ready.
And also, this ties into our general conversation, too, about toxic masculinity, because heaven forbid a man have feelings and want to talk about them. Because in days gone by, a man couldn't cry, a man couldn't have his feelings, and if you had them, you ate them. You bottled them and you kept them in. Yeah. And you took them out on your kids later, God damn it.
Probably.
Or yourself in a very harmful way.
Yes, absolutely. That generation of men just rotted from the inside out from all of the stuff that they had just stuffed down inside themselves because they couldn't let it out, because they couldn't be seen to be emotional or feminine in any way, because that was such a big problem.
Heaven forbid.
You can't be weak.
In my opinion, that is what makes you a strong man. That is a trait that most women appreciate. We don't want you to hide your feelings. We don't want you to think that makes you weak. We want you to communicate with us. That's what healthy relationships are built on.
I've heard people say, like, being brave is not being afraid. It's being afraid and going forward anyway. You
love
know,
that.
so being afraid of or being uncomfortable with a conversation that you feel you need to have, bravery, something that is often seen as masculine, is not about not being afraid or being reckless or running headlong into things. It's about having those feelings and still, you know, being afraid and being apprehensive and still going ahead anyway and doing those things because they need to be done. And those conversations, I think, are good examples of that.
I think probably as good a time as any to wrap up the episode. I look forward to the next time that maybe we get an opportunity to have a boys' night. I hope our listeners find our opinions to be valuable.
In summary, I think that in terms of just the whole like toxic masculinity thing, it's not even like they feel like so manly or they're so aggressive or they're this or they're that. It's just a lot of men out here who feel like they have to be this or that or the other thing in order to be seen
And
as
I got to tell you,
desirable. I
It's
guess.
so refreshing to start letting some of that go. And as I've gotten older,
Yeah.
that's something that I just take more and more of that worry or that I just take it off my plate and out of the world. And a completely non-related but related example is, do you remember for years how it was like cool to like hate Nickelback
Yeah.
and hate Creed?
Yeah.
Because that was a cool thing to do.
Yeah.
Now I've gotten older, and this is, you know, take this for what it's worth. Like I'm like, why did I hate them? I am now deciding to not hate them. You know, while that's a minor load off of my back,
But
I think you can extrapolate from there.
Yeah,
you know what
it is
I mean?
it's a good
and that goes
example.
as you get more comfortable with yourself and who you are as a man or as a
Yeah.
woman or as a part of a couple or as a throuple or in a polyamorous relationship. Like, it only gets better the more of this shit you let go over time.
Yeah. And it really frees up your time and your energy to focus on things that actually matter and not bullshit that society has shoved down your throat,
Yeah.
which is, again, what we're talking about here on this podcast.
Because
is
there are
just
still bands
societal
worthy of that
norms.
level of hate.
Oh, sure.
You know, but just it's no longer Creed or Nickelback.
I could make an episode out of that. One final thought from me, based on everything you guys just said, short and sweet. You can continue to carry that toxic masculinity with you. You can continue to puff out your chest and beat your chest and scream into the void, or you can decide to be authentic and wear your emotions on your sleeve. You can opt to communicate with people, and you're the one who gets to decide if you want to feed into the toxic masculinity that surrounds you. And I promise, if you stop doing that, nothing bad is going to happen. All that's going to happen is you are going to open up a whole new world for yourself.
You'll communicate better with your partner
Absolutely.
as a result. It all gets better.
You'll be more genuine. You'll be happier. I guarantee it.
And I can tell you that you're absolutely right, that you know, letting go of that will make you a much happier person. And you can continue to carry around that idea of what a man should be and try to focus on that and put a bunch of energy into that. But I can tell you, toxic masculinity is heavy. And when you put it down, you are so much freer and lighter, and you can do whatever the hell you feel like doing without any fear or whatever, because you don't have to carry this heavy load of what everybody else thinks you should be and trying to be that for someone else and not for yourself.
Really good example of that before we clue this up. I have a friend, and we didn't get into this, and I definitely have a lot to say about this particular topic, so maybe we'll do an episode on it. But I have a friend who I am absolutely, a male friend, who I am absolutely convinced is bisexual. Like I said, I definitely want to get more into that in another episode because I think there's a lot to be said about that. However, he is not out. He is miserable. He is living a miserable existence. And I am absolutely convinced, I obviously don't want to say anything,
Of course.
you know, to out this person, but I'm absolutely convinced that it's because he's not living his authentic life because of fear, of small town mentality. There's a plethora of reasons. That's a really good example of not laying that down and where it gets you. And the longer you carry that around and don't live authentically, you're just we're only here for such a small period of
Bingo.
time, you know? So
I ain't got time to waste on pointless shit like that.
Exactly. And it's exhausting trying to conform to what everybody else thinks. And if you ask 10 people, you'll get 10 different opinions about what they think you should be doing or who you should be, but ultimately trying to mash all 10 of those things together and become that person, first of all, is really difficult. And second of all, ends up with you being nothing like the person that you are inside. If you just let out the person that you are inside and live that authentic truth, as we say here, sprint towards that authentic truth. Sprint towards who you really are as a person and away from all of this bullshit. Put it down and run away, because the moment you do, holy crap, do you feel better.
I think it is time to say goodbye for this episode of the Big Boy Feelings podcast. On behalf of Brent, Ashley, and Ashley, I'm Chris, and I can't wait to see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Big Girl Feelings podcast, a Right Good Studios production. Cover art by Jerry Stamp. Follow us on social media. You can find us at Big Girl Feelings on Instagram and Facebook. Our website is biggirlfeelings.com. Do you have questions for us? Topic suggestions? Stories you'd like to share? Please email us at ashley@biggirlfeelings.com. Our podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you listen to podcasts. If you're enjoying the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Are you done choking? That's what she said.